Hello, my name is Jennifer Bullock, and I have created a presentation on sexual orientation in hopes that the understanding of sexual orientation will be better comprehended. First, I have a layout for the presentation. First, I'm going to talk about sexual orientation, then gender identity, transsexual, transgender people, and then more about that verse, transsexual orientation. And then finally, I'm going to have questions to consider. So first, sexual orientation explained. Sex is explained by individuals' biological features such as penis, vagina, testicles, and uterus. However, gender is explained by a person's behavioral characteristics and how she perceives a particular culture at a specific time. Genders can also be how a person interprets his or herself, whether it's a woman, man, transgender, or transsexual. So what is sexual orientation? Well, sexual orientation attributes to the enduring pattern of the emotional, romantic, and sensual attraction towards men and women, as this also characteristics towards a person's identity based on their attractions, behaviors, and membership in a community of other individuals with the same beliefs. Interesting. So, gender identity. What is that? This is where a person calls themselves, for instance, someone can call themselves male, female, transgender, transsexual, such as a female to male or a male to female. And then there's also genderqueer. A transgender is a broad term used for people whose gender identity or his or her appearance do not fit what we call the average. Of course, transgender challenging and protest characteristics are being branded for men and women all around. Many transgenders are mocked for acting and dressing like the opposite sex of his or her biological gender. However, a transgender, a real transgender, would not allow this to affect how they feel of the opinions of other people that may or may not agree with them. Sexual. Transsexual is another broad term to explain when a person who lives as the opposite sex that he or she were initially born as. A transsexual could consist of changing his or her name to the sex that he or she lives as, taking hormones to alter his or her appearance to the gender they prefer, and then there is also transsexuals who go under sex reassignment surgery, which is what changes the physical appearance for life. Whether or not this person ever wants to reverse it, they could, but why would they go through the process of having their appearance change permanently if this is not what they wanted? However, there are many transsexual people who fear he or she were born in the wrong body, because even though a person is born a female biologically, that person may not feel like a female or like a male. This circumstance can also be referred to as gender identity disorder, which can be offensive to the person because a disorder is thought to mean something is wrong. And just because someone is born a female does not feel like a female does not mean that someone is wrong with that person. People who come up with such a phrase as a gender identity disorder think that the individual is not normal. Just because someone is born a male but feels like a female does not mean that is not normal, just because the world thinks so. The world believes what is normal because of what he or she are being told. For instance, as Bradley 2010 wrote, the frame and effect is the idea that manipulating the way information is presented can influence and alter decision-making judgment about that information. Though the use of images, words, and by presenting a general context around the information presented we can influence how people think about that information. That's interesting, but it makes sense. Transgender people. Think about Laverne Cox, a transgender that is now an actress and LGBTQ activist. A quote that Cox states, "We are not what other people say we are. We are who we know ourselves to be, and we are what we love. That's okay." There are many people that transgender that is famous, and there are many people that you may know or you may not know. But there are more than plenty of transgender people out there that have a fabulous life. Alright, think about Lee T. Who's Lee T? Who was initially known as Bruce Jenner. Most people know about Bruce Jenner. Then there's Alexis Arcute, who was born as Robert. Then back to Laverne Cox, who was previously mentioned, who is famous for playing a transgender on The Orange is the New Black. What's so fascinating about Cox is the fact that Cox is playing a transgender and she is a transgender, so she knows exactly what this character feels and thinks and what she is going through. Then there's Marcy Bowers, who was the first transgender to become a doctor. Then there's Janet Mock, who is an editor for People.com, who is also transgender and a transgender activist. And finally, there's Chaz Bono, who happens to be the son of Cher and Sonny Bono, who happens to be a transgender male and a gay activist. All these people are transgenders. All these people know who they are, who they love to be. Just think about that. So let's talk more about adverse transsexual orientation. A trans man is someone who is born biological female. However, that person identifies themselves as a male. And then we have Miss Cox, who is a trans woman who was born biologically as a male, but she identifies herself as a female. Sexual orientation is different from gender identity and is commonly confused between the two. However, sexual orientation is when someone is attracted to someone, such as straight, heterosexual. This is people who are romantically or sexually attracted to the opposite sex, which is what we consider the average or the norm. Then we have gay, lesbian, homosexual. These are people who are romantically or sexually attracted to the same sex. Bisexual. These are people who are romantically attracted to people of both sexes. Asexual. This is a term that not a lot of people know about, but is when people who are not sexually attracted to anyone, which is more or less means that they have no sexual desire and are considered to have a lack of sexual orientation. Then finally, pansexual, which is interesting too. This is a sexual and romantic feelings towards someone regardless of his sex or gender identity, and is considered a sexual orientation. And how I feel is very similar to bisexual, because you're not judging someone for who they are, but who they are inside. It's interesting and fascinating. Sexual orientation has been and still is a taboo subject for many people. Many people believe that sexual orientation is based on one's gender and one's sexual desire. However, this is not the case. A transgender male could be gay or straight, but how would you explain that? There is no explaining. The person looks and feels like a man. However, he could be attracted to a male or female. Of course, everyone has his or her opinions on the topic, but having a more open-minded would be such a better outcome. There are some things to consider and think about, though. Think about it. 1. Do you know anybody who's ever been discriminated against, whether he or she is straight, gay, bisexual, transsexual, or transgender? Or even if it was about his or her sexual orientation? Then, have you ever been discriminated against for certain personal opinions or views that you have or had, or maybe even for your own sexual orientation? And then, what are your views on employers to discriminate to hire or fire someone because of his or her sexual orientation? The questions can be open and broad load of questions and answers, but understanding how broad sexual orientation is with an open mind will open doors to future debates and understanding on the topic itself. And all the information I received and I explained, most of the information did come from the American Psychological Association. I did get a few quotes from a couple other websites that seem very credible. And I hope that this presentation has explained what sexual orientation is and hopefully open your mind to everything. Thank you.